Picture this: June 22, 1941. Dawn breaks over the Soviet border, and 3 million Nazi troops unleash chaos. This is Operation Barbarossa. Tanks thunder, planes scream, and cities burn under the fury of blitzkrieg. Did Hitler's generals know they were marching toward disaster from the very start? Stay with me, because we're about to shatter the myths that have long hidden the truth behind Barbarossa's spectacular failure. This is a story of fatal arrogance, unbreakable Soviet grit, and a surprising lifeline from America that left the Nazis reeling. Trust me, what you're about to hear will stun you. Let us rewind to 1941. Hitler's plan is breathtakingly bold: crush the Soviet Union in a mere 6 weeks. He names it after the medieval Emperor Barbarossa, a symbol of his grand imperial vision. 3 massive army groups, North, Center, and South, comprising 3.3 million men, prepare to strike. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, is the spearhead, with 1.5 million troops, 2,500 tanks, 2,000 planes, and 7,000 artillery guns. Legendary panzer commanders like Heinz Guderian and Hermann Hoth are ready to lead the charge. On paper, was this the ultimate war machine? The numbers screamed yes. At 3:15 a.m., the panzers roll across the Bug River. The Luftwaffe swarms Soviet airfields, obliterating 1,200 planes by noon. The Red Army's 3 million troops are caught completely off guard. Their outdated T-26 tanks shatter like glass against the superior Panzer Fus. On July 3rd, Minsk falls, and with it, 300,000 Soviet prisoners are taken. By August, Smolensk collapses, and another 300,000 are captured. It seemed like nothing could stop this onslaught. Hitler certainly thought so. From his headquarters at the Wolf's Lair, he boasted, "The Russian Colossus is broken." Propaganda reels flooded German cinemas, showing burning villages and endless columns of marching POWs. Berlin confidently predicted Moscow would fall by September. Guderian's tanks had surged an incredible 400 miles in just 2 weeks. But here's where the first great myth crumbles: the idea that Barbarossa was a flawless operation. The truth: the logistical backbone of the German army began to snap almost immediately. Supply lines stretched 1,000 miles back to Berlin. Fuel depots couldn't keep up, and panzers were forced to idle for days, burning precious time. In his own memoir, Panzer Leader, Guderian admitted, "By July, gas shortages had halted us." And then there were the Soviet roads, mostly dirt tracks that turned into impassable quagmires of mud with the first rain. The standard German trucks, the underpowered Opel Blitzes, simply sank. What else shattered their momentum? Sheer Soviet defiance. Despite losing 2 million men by September, the Red Army refused to break. Stalin's Order 270 was brutal and clear: retreat is treason. Civilians joined the fight, burning crops, poisoning wells, and waging a scorched earth campaign that left nothing for the invaders. Entire villages vanished, and Nazi supply columns began to starve. Did the German generals see these cracks forming? Some did, and much earlier than you'd think. Guderian, the master of blitzkrieg himself, sent warnings back to Berlin as early as July 10th. He was stunned by the seemingly endless stream of Soviet reserves. Another 4 million men would be mobilized by December. And then came a nasty surprise: the T-34 tank. With its powerful 76-mm gun and revolutionary sloped armor, it shocked German panzer crews who watched their shells bounce right off. On August 30th, at Yelnya, General Zhukov launched a counterattack that retook ground, the first significant German defeat of the campaign, costing them 50,000 casualties. But what truly stunned Guderian happened at Mtsensk on October 6th. General Katakov's T-34 Brigade ambushed the 4th Panzer Division. The result was a massacre. 133 German tanks were destroyed, while the Soviets lost only 20. Guderian wrote in disbelief, Their tanks outclass ours. And there was another factor the Germans completely underestimated: Soviet depth. As the panzers advanced, Stalin was orchestrating a colossal industrial migration. Over 1,500 factories, producing tanks, planes, and guns, were packed up and moved east, beyond the Ural Mountains and into Siberia, safe from German bombers. By October, these relocated factories were churning out 1,000 tanks a month. How did they move so much so fast? This is where the story takes another surprising turn: American Lend-Lease. The program was signed in March 1941, but aid began to surge after the invasion. In September, Convoy Dervish set sail from Liverpool, 40 ships braving 2,000 miles of treacherous Arctic storms. What was on board? 200 Studebaker trucks, 500 jeeps, and 100,000 rifles. Did this really change the war? Absolutely. The Soviet-made ZIS-5 trucks frequently stalled in the mud, but the American 2.5-ton Studebakers, with their robust 4x4 drive, rolled right through. They hauled factory machinery, ammunition, and troops to the front. As Stalingrad's hero, General Chuikov, later said, "American wheels saved our lines." And why should this matter to Americans today? Lend-Lease wasn't charity. It was brilliant strategy. President Roosevelt knew that if the Soviet Union collapsed, America would be left to fight Nazi Germany alone. By December, 180,000 tons of gear had arrived, including trucks, radios, and even spam, all vital for the Soviet war effort. Now, let's get to the next phase. Operation Typhoon. Launched on October 2nd, this was Hitler's final all-or-nothing push for Moscow. Army Group Center now had 1 million men and 1,700 tanks. Guderian's Panzer Group II drove towards Tula, south of the capital, while Hoth's Panzer Group III aimed for Kalinin to the north. Could they finally seize the heart of the Soviet Union? The initial wins were staggering. On October 7th, the Vyazma pocket closed, trapping another 500,000 Soviet soldiers. By October 13th, the Mozhaisk Line, Moscow's last major defense, had fallen. The capital was just 100 miles away. German soldiers started dreaming of spending the winter in the Kremlin, but then nature itself fought back. The Rasputitsa, Russia's infamous rainy season, arrived in full force. The roads dissolved into a sea of sludge, and tanks literally sank in the mud. Supply trucks stalled miles behind the front, and ammunition began to dwindle. The chief of the German General Staff, Franz Halder, wrote in his diary on October 15th, "Mud is our enemy." Did the generals on the ground sense the impending failure? Guderian certainly did. On October 20th, he warned his superior, von Bock, "We're stretched too thin." He requested a pause to regroup, but Berlin ignored him. In Crimea, General von Manstein noted with alarm, "Logistics are collapsing." How did the Soviets respond? They turned Moscow into a fortress. 500,000 civilians, mostly women and teenagers, dug anti-tank ditches around the city. General Zhukov, the man who had delivered the first blow at Yelnya, was recalled from Leningrad to command the capital's defense, mustering 1.2 million troops and 1,000 tanks, including a growing number of formidable T-34s. And what about that American aid? Did it make a difference here? Yes, specifically the radios. Lend-Lease Hallicrafters radios allowed Soviet divisions to finally sync their movements. Zhukov's orders could now reach his frontline commanders in hours, not days. The Germans, in contrast, were still heavily reliant on motorcycle couriers who often got lost or stuck in the mud. Then came the final, bone-chilling shock. In November, winter descended with a vengeance. Temperatures plummeted to a terrifying 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The German troops, still in their summer uniforms, began to freeze to death. The oil in their engines solidified, and their rifles jammed. The Soviets, however, were prepared. Clad in their warm felt boots and quilted winter jackets, they endured. The ultimate symbol of German failure came from a single reconnaissance battalion that managed to reach the outskirts of Moscow. They could see the spires of the Kremlin through their binoculars, but they were exhausted, frozen, and out of fuel. They could go no further. Just days later, Zhukov unleashed his Siberian divisions. Fresh, fully equipped, and trained for winter warfare, in a massive counteroffensive that sent the Germans reeling backwards. Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's master plan, was dead. It was defeated not just by one thing, but by a perfect storm of German hubris-flawed logistics, the vastness of Russia, the unyielding will of the Soviet people, and a crucial, often overlooked lifeline of American trucks, radios, and supplies. The road to Berlin did German generals see the end coming in the winter of 1941? Some did. They just whispered it. On November 10th, the legendary Heinz Guderian, master of the Blitzkrieg, sent a chilling report from the frozen front lines. His message was blunt. Further advance is impossible. He saw the reality. His panzers were bogged down in mud and snow, his men were freezing, and the Soviets were not breaking. Back in Germany, Chief of the General Staff Franz Halder confided a similar fear to his private diary. He wrote, "We now face the prospect of a prolonged war. This wasn't the lightning victory Hitler had promised. This was a nightmare scenario. But when these warnings reached the Führer's headquarters, they were met with fury. Hitler's command was simple and insane. Push on!" He demanded victory, ignoring the reports of collapsing supply lines and exhausted soldiers. He believed sheer will could conquer the Russian winter. This clash between frontline reality and high command fantasy set the stage for one of the greatest turning points of World War II. What finally broke the German advance? On December 5, 1941, the tide turned with brutal force. Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, having secretly amassed immense reserves, unleashed a counteroffensive that stunned the world. 100 fresh Soviet divisions, 1 million men strong, slammed into the German lines along a 400-mile front. The iconic Soviet T-34 tanks, perfectly designed for the harsh conditions, led the charge. But they weren't alone. Zipping through the snow and mud, outflanking the immobilized panzers, were thousands of American-made jeeps. These rugged vehicles gave Soviet commanders unprecedented mobility to coordinate their attacks. The German army, overstretched and frozen, simply shattered. Within weeks, they had lost 400,000 men and were thrown back 200 miles from Moscow's gates. It was the Wehrmacht's first great defeat. But how did America, a nation not yet officially at war with Germany, fuel this incredible Soviet counterpunch? The answer lies in the treacherous waters of the Arctic. The Arctic convoys were a lifeline. Take PQ-2, which set sail in October 1941. 60 ships, loaded with vital supplies, navigated the Barents Sea, a hunting ground for German U-boats and Luftwaffe bombers. The journey was hell. U-boats sank 3 ships. Bombers claimed 5 more, but the rest got through. When the surviving ships docked in Murmansk, they unloaded 200 Dodge trucks and 100 advanced radio sets. This wasn't just a trickle of aid, it was a technological force multiplier. For the first time, Soviet commanders could use reliable American communications to coordinate their vast armies with precision, turning a mass of soldiers into a sophisticated fighting machine. What truly shocked the German generals, more than the cold or the mud, was the seemingly endless supply of Soviet soldiers. In Crimea, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, one of Germany's most brilliant strategists, was preparing for what he thought would be a final mop-up operation. Instead, he found himself facing 500,000 fresh Soviet troops. He later wrote in his memoir, Lost Victories, that their sheer manpower simply overwhelmed us. But it wasn't just manpower, it was mobile manpower. By 1942, an astonishing 50% of all Soviet supplies were being moved not by horse-drawn carts, but by powerful American trucks. This logistical backbone, built in Detroit, allowed the Red Army to move troops and equipment at a speed the Germans could no longer match. The Blitzkrieg had been reversed. How did the Nazi leadership react to this unfolding catastrophe? With pure panic, masked by delusional orders. As his armies reeled backward, Hitler issued his infamous Stand Fast order. He forbade any retreat, condemning entire divisions to encirclement and annihilation. Soldiers froze to death in open fields, their summer uniforms offering no protection against the 40-degree temperatures. Frostbite alone claimed over 100,000 casualties. One general dared to defy the madness. General Erich Hübner, commanding the 4th Panzer Army, ordered a tactical withdrawal to save his men. For this act of sanity, Hitler sacked him in disgrace. Before he was dismissed, Hübner sent a desperate warning to Berlin. A disaster of Napoleonic proportions is looming. No one listened. And what about the American impact? The trickle of aid from the Arctic convoys was about to become a flood. The Lend-Lease Act, signed earlier in 1941, was now in full swing. In 1942 alone, 2.7 million tons of American gear poured into the Soviet Union. Studebaker and Ford trucks became the workhorses of the Red Army, hauling artillery, ammunition, and troops to the front. They were so crucial that Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev would later admit, "The American trucks gave us our mobility." Did the average German soldier sense that the war was lost? Absolutely. The confident letters home from the summer of 1941 turned into desperate pleas. "We're starving," one wrote. "We're freezing. All is lost." Morale collapsed. Desertions, almost unheard of before, spiked to 15,000 by January 1942. As demoralized German soldiers straggled back from the front, they were hunted by an unseen enemy. Soviet snipers, many of whom were using high-quality American-made rifle scopes, picking them off one by one. Behind the scenes, Nazi propaganda worked overtime to hide the truth, pushing myths of heroic struggle and unwavering unity. But what was the reality? The German High Command was tearing itself apart. Guderian openly argued with Field Marshal von Kluge over the impossible strategy. In his diary, Halder lamented, "Berlin completely ignores the reality on the ground. The generals knew they were being led to ruin, but they were powerless to stop it." And how did the Soviets exploit this internal chaos? Zhukov's counteroffensive was a masterpiece of precision, made possible by that very same American technology. Using U.S.-supplied radios, Soviet tank commanders synchronized their T-34 attacks, hitting the weakest points in the German line where command and control had broken down. On December 15th, the city of Mojaisk was retaken, a key gateway to Moscow. 50,000 Germans were killed or captured. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht was dead. When did the final, undeniable realization of defeat set in for the German leadership? In January 1942, the German High Command held a crisis meeting. The mood was grim. General Kurt Zeitzler laid out the brutal math: the Soviets are now outsupplying us in every category. The Luftwaffe's ace general, Adolf Galland, added his own stark assessment. The influx of American aid has decisively shifted the balance in the air. But Hitler, trapped in his own fantasy, refused to listen. He railed at his generals, accused them of cowardice, and began planning impossible new offensives for the spring. He was still playing a game everyone else knew was over. Did this one winter campaign really shape the rest of the war? Absolutely. The successful defense of Moscow was the wound from which the Third Reich would never recover. It led directly to the even greater disasters at Stalingrad and Kursk. By 1943, the Red Army was on a relentless advance westward, an advance powered by over 427,000 American trucks. The logistics of victory were rolling on American wheels. What's the ultimate legacy of this moment? The collapse of Operation Barbarossa marked the high point of Hitler's empire. From that winter onward, the path led only to Berlin in 1945, where the Soviets, with their tanks, planes, and trucks, Many built or supplied by the U.S. would raise their flag over the Reichstag. Even Manstein, looking back after the war, admitted, "The winter of 1941 was, in reality, our end." And why does this piece of history matter so much today? It's a powerful reminder that logistics, not just tactics, win wars. The factories in Detroit, Seattle, and across America became an arsenal of democracy that overwhelmed the Axis. It was President Roosevelt's grand vision. By aiding our allies, we could secure our own freedom. So, could the Nazis have ever won against the Soviet Union? When you factor in the vastness of Russia, the resilience of its people, and the industrial might of the United States, the answer is a clear no. The myths of Barbarossa were designed to hide a simple truth. They were doomed from the start. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into history as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from World War II. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next video. Let me know in the comments, how much do you think American aid really crushed Hitler's war machine? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you next time.